Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 4 obviously was officially announced and confirmed at the Dragon Ball Games Battle Hour with the first official trailer for this game. Now, the biggest question and biggest request that I see a lot of people have for this game is, one, how big will the roster be? And then in terms of request, they want a massive roster out of Budokai Tenkaichi. And some people have even been a little bit unrealistic, saying that they want every character from Budokai Tenkaichi 3 in this game, along with others from Dragon Ball Super, which would bring the roster size to somewhere around like 200 total characters. And in this video, I'm going to talk about my personal expectations for this roster and why, like I said, it's kind of unrealistic to expect every character from Budokai Tenkaichi 3 to be in this game when it does release. So let's get it started first and foremost by taking a look at the official website of Dragon Ball, because there is a somewhat good sign in this post that they made talking about Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi, the new one that was just confirmed. Now, in this part, it just says that a new game basically was confirmed. We're not going to take a look at that. But down here, it does say the first release in the 3D action fighting game series was Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi, all the way back in 2005. The game was such a hit, it was followed up with two sequels, Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 2 and then Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 3, with all three garnering popularity among fans thanks to their faithful recreations of special moves and massive rosters. This is really the part out of all of this that I want to take a look at and acknowledge, because they are clearly acknowledging that they knew what made these games popular, and massive rosters was definitely part of that. So I fully expect a massive roster in this game when it does release, but we gotta also realize what technically is a massive roster for a fighting game. Massive rosters for fighting games is really anything, in my opinion, above 50 characters is a massive roster without a doubt. And personally, I'm expecting somewhere between 50 to 100 characters to be in this game when it does release, for multiple reasons. The first and foremost reason, guys, that I'm only expecting 50 to 100 characters for this game is you got to think, this game is being built from scratch technically. Like, this game is being built from the ground up. It is going to be a brand new engine that Budokai Tenkaichi 3 did not use. And it's going to be 100% brand new models that were not used in Budokai Tenkaichi 3 at all. Models take a lot of time to actually make and put together for games, and it's why you see a lot of fighting games don't have the biggest rosters in the world, because it does take time for those models and then time to make those characters seem somewhat individual and unique to themselves. Now, obviously, that was not as much of a thing in the Budokai Tenkaichi series back in the day. A lot of characters were similar in a sense, but at the same time, I do feel in this one, they will make them a little bit more unique from each other because, well, we are in a new era of gaming. This is literally 16 years later down the line. So the simple fact that they have to make 100% brand new models, though, is the biggest reason why I do not see this roster really coming close to what Budokai Tenkaichi 3 was, at least when it comes to the release of the base roster of this game. And now I want to take a look at some other base rosters of games that have come out for Dragon Ball and were technically the first installment in the series, because even though this is part of the Budokai Tenkaichi series and it is Budokai Tenkaichi, it's technically the first installment of a new series of Budokai Tenkaichi, in my opinion, because again, everything is being built from the ground up and the models are 100% brand new. So the last three major games, or major Dragon Ball games, in my opinion, that I want to take a look at are Budokai Tenkaichi 1, the very first game in this series, Xenoverse 1, and Raging Blast 1. These are all games that had to make brand new models for their game, and while their roster was still fairly big for a first installment in a game, it was nothing in comparison to Budokai Tenkaichi 3. So let's start out with Budokai Tenkaichi 1. This is a game that had somewhere between 64 to 70 characters. I've looked it up and I saw one website say like 64, another website said like 67. So we're just going to say 64 to 70 is how many characters were actually in Budokai Tenkaichi 1. Now, that is a fairly massive roster, but again, it doesn't come close to Budokai Tenkaichi 3. Now let's take a look at Raging Blast 1. Raging Blast 1 had only 43 characters in it, and that was a big issue with a lot of fans because Raging Blast was supposed to technically be the continuation of the Budokai Tenkaichi series, and it was clear by how the game played, but at the same time, it did not have that massive roster that Tenkaichi 3 did. So a lot of people just stuck with Budokai Tenkaichi 3 back then instead of actually going into the Raging Blast series. And it's why I feel one of the major reasons that the sales for that game were actually so low. Like, Raging Blast as a game was actually very, very good. A lot of people who played it will tell you it's one of their favorite Dragon Ball games ever, but at the same time, sadly, that series just did not sell well. It is literally the worst selling series on major consoles since PS2 became a thing for Dragon Ball. So again, Raging Blast 1 only had 43 characters in it, right? And then Xenoverse 1. This is a series that in Xenoverse 2 currently, we sit somewhere like 120 characters or so. But Xenoverse 1, when it first initially released, only had 47 characters that were actually playable in the game. So you got to look at all three of these games, and the highest roster that any of them had was Budokai Tenkaichi 1 with 64 to 70. Now, when these games had further installments in the series, like Budokai Tenkaichi from Budokai Tenkaichi 1 to 2, and then finally 3, the rosters grew significantly with each and every single game. Even Raging Blast 2, I believe the second game was somewhere around like 65-ish characters overall, which is a fairly nice increase from Raging Blast 1. And then, of course, like I already mentioned, Xenoverse 2 compared to Xenoverse 1 in terms of a roster size is much more massive because they are able to use those same models that they had from the original game and transfer them over to the next one while maybe making slight improvements to them at the same time. That is why usually the first installments of a series like this do not have the most characters in them, but through time they can build up to massive rosters overall. It's why Budokai Tenkaichi 3 had the roster it did, because Budokai Tenkaichi 2 built off of what Budokai Tenkaichi 1 had, and then 3 built off of what Budokai Tenkaichi 2 had. Xenoverse 2 currently built off of Xenoverse 1, and now obviously with all the DLCs and things like that, we have reached a massive roster somewhere of around 120 characters. Even Raging Blast, like I said, they did increase from like 43 to 65-ish, and that's because they were able to take those models from the first game, use them in the second one, slightly maybe improve on them, but still have the base models overall, which takes a lot of time, like I said, to make, guys. So I fully expect somewhere between 50 to 100 characters in this game when it does release, which is a fairly massive roster without a doubt. But at the same time, there also will be DLC coming to this game as well, and that's something that I think people are not accounting for with this game right here when they're thinking about it, because obviously Budokai Tenkaichi 3 did not have any DLC at all. That was not a time in gaming where DLC was really a thing. What you got with the game is what you got with the game, and that was it. But now DLC is a major factor in gaming. So even if it starts somewhere between 50 to 100 characters, it is very possible that this game comes up around 100 plus, maybe 110ish, 120 characters overall when everything is said and done and we have all the DLCs out for this game as well. So you got to take into consideration two major things. One, DLC, like I just mentioned, that is a major source of money for a lot of gaming companies now, and they will definitely be saving characters for DLC without a doubt. And then two, like I said, you have to consider they are making these models 100% from scratch, which does take a lot of time, and technically you could consider this the first installment in a new Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi series. Yes, I'm hoping that, it'll still have a lot of similar features from Budokai Tenkaichi 3 and the old Budokai Tenkaichi series without a doubt, and I do believe it will. But at the same time, I also did say this is basically being built from the ground up, which is why I say it's technically like the first installment in a new Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi series as well. So let me know what you guys think about this down below in the comments, and where your expectations lie as well when it comes to a roster, because like I said, it's probably the #1 mentioned thing I've seen when it comes to what people want for this game. A lot of people want a massive roster just like the old Budokai Tenkaichi series had, because that was a major selling point of that series. It was very cool to play with a ton of different Dragon Ball characters in those games, and I do believe they will try to somewhat recreate that with this new Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi. But again, at the same time, you do have to consider everything is being built from 100% scratch, and they have to make all these models brand new, all things like that, which does take a lot of time without a doubt. So again, let me know where your expectations lie in terms of a roster. How much characters do you think will be in this game on the base release? And then also, what are you most hyped for when it comes to Budokai Tenkaichi as well? Let me know that down below in the comments. But as always, man, thank you guys for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed. Until next time, hope you have a good one. Peace, y'all.